Hi everyone, welcome to your Take Up for homework 1.1 and 1.2. Your teacher will be playing this video for you right now so that you can correct your solutions in an efficient way. Please make sure that when you correct them, if you've made any errors, that you add in red pen what you should have done. Okay, so you're not just marking with a tick and flick, you are actually going to be correcting this as well today. Okay, all right, so hopefully we did well, but let's take a look and go through it. The first question says that Pretty is going to have a meal. She can choose one starter and one main course from the menu. Write down all the possible outcomes that Pretty can choose. Because we need to be logical, the examining board will allow you to use the letters so that you don't have to worry about writing out the full thing. If you did write out the full thing, that's fine. It just wastes your time. Okay, so salad starts with an S, so we can have salad, then pasta, salad, then the rice, or salad, then the burger. And we're going to continue this pattern for the other two starters, which means in total we have 9 possibilities. You get 2 marks if you had all 9 correct. You get 1 mark if you had at least 6 correct. Okay, so please make sure you also write down your mark. That brings us to question 2. It says that Mohsin, Yusuf, and Luke are going to play a game. At the end of the game, one of them will be in first place, one in second place, and one in third place. And to use the table to fill in all the possible outcomes. So Mohsin is going to be in first place for 2 of these possibilities, followed by Yusuf and Luke. And similarly, it could be followed by Luke in second and Yusuf in third. Okay, and we follow this pattern, changing who's in first place. Okay, which gives us 6 possible outcomes in total. You get 2 marks for the correct 6 outcomes. You get 1 mark if you only got 3 correct ones. Okay, bringing us to question 3, which says that Jeff is choosing a shrub and a rose tree for his garden. At the garden center, there are 17 different types of shrubs and some rose trees. Jeff says there are 215 different ways to choose 1 shrub and 1 rose tree. Could Jeff be correct? Well, I know from our combinations work that if we want to have the total number of outcomes, we should be taking the number of shrubs and multiplying it by the number of rose trees, which I've represented by saying that 215 would have to be 17 shrubs times the number of rose trees. I chose an R. We don't know what R is. Now, in order to figure out R, I would have to divide. So I've done this. But when I divide, I end up with a number that is not a whole number. It's not an integer number. And therefore, he can't possibly be correct because I wouldn't expect to have 0.6 something of a rose bush. Okay, this would have had to be an integer value, okay, without a decimal place in order for him to be correct. So we can reflect that he is incorrect. Okay, and you're getting your mark for the process here and also for your statement. Okay, so in total, that's 2 marks. Okay, so that brings us to question 4. Now, in this case, we can see that there are 3 cards or tiles that Sally has, and that each tile has a different number on it. She puts the 3 tiles down to make a number. Each number is made with all 3 tiles. How many different numbers can Sally make? So now we transition. We're not being asked to write down the combinations. That would actually waste our time. We're being asked how many different combinations. Well, when we look at the first placed card, whether it be the 3, 2, or 1, we have 3 possibilities, okay, in the first position. But when we look at the second position, I've now used one of the numbers. So there's only 2 possibilities left for the second position because I've already used one of the numbers. And when I get to the third position, then there's only 1 possible number left. So in total, for our combinations, that would be 3 times 2 times 1, which is 6. So you have to think about the fact that each time you place a number down, there's 1 less number you can put down, which is why these numbers dropped by 1 each time when we multiplied them. Okay, so that is how you would get the answer to question 4. Okay, you get 1 mark either for showing this work or listing the combination. So if you did list them, you'd still get that process mark. Okay, and obviously for the correct answer, you get the other mark. So in total, that was out of 2. Oops, sorry. That brings us to question 5. It says there are 17 men and 26 women in a choir. The choir is going to sing at a concert. One of the men and one of the women are going to be chosen to make a pair to sing the first song. Work out the number of different pairs that can be chosen. Well, it's one of each, so we would expect for part A that to be 17 times 26, which is equal to 442. Okay, so we should have gotten 442, and that only gives you, actually gives you 2 marks because you're recognizing that your process mark, okay, is to actually do the 17 times 26, and then you get an answer mark for your final answer. So that's out of 2 marks, okay. And for part B, it says 2 of the men are to be chosen to make a pair to sing the second song. Ben thinks the number of different pairs that can be chosen is 136. Mark thinks the number of pairs that can be chosen is 272. Who is correct, Ben or Mark? Give a reason for your answer. Well, let's have a think. 2 of the men, okay. Well, 17 times 16 would be what we would do. Question is why. 17 men originally, okay? But once we've chosen the first man, that's 16, okay? Now, technically, I have to divide that by 2, because let's say we have a Bob and a Mike, yes? Well, I could choose Bob first and then Mike, or I could choose Mike first and then Bob. So we actually have half of that, okay? Now, if I was to work that out, 17 times 16 would be, let's work that out, 17 times 16, 6 times 7, 2, okay, carry the 4, 6 times 1 is 6 plus the 4, which is 10, 0, and then 1 times 7, 1 times 1, okay, and that's going to give me 272, all right, so, but remember, we have to cut that in half because Bob then Mike and Mike then Bob is the same. Okay, so we have 272 divided by 2, which gives us a 1, and then 2 into 7 is 3, carry the 1, and then a 6. Okay, 136, so Ben is correct. Okay, and the nice thing is because you've actually shown your work and the correct calculation, that is your reason. Okay, so you don't need to say anything else at this stage other than Ben is correct because you've given your reason through your calculations. All right, and so that gives you your other mark for the question. That question was out of 3 in total. Okay. Right, so now what you need to do is go back and tally up your score for section 1.1. It's out of 11, and put your score down. Your teacher will do your percentage later when they take in your homework. Okay, that should be enough time. Right, let's move on to question 6 now. It says that we're using the fact that 5.4 times 36 is equal to 194.4. Now, we've taught you to make number families out of this, but we also don't want to waste time in our exam questions. So we need to look at the question, see if I have to create any of my division statements. In this case, I don't. They're both multiplied, so I don't need to create a division statement. Okay, so let's take a look at part I. Well, in part I, they still have a 5.4, so I haven't changed that, but they've multiplied by 3.6. So in effect, in part I should be dividing my answer by 10 because 36 divided by 10 gives me 3.6. So that means instead of having 194.4, we will have 19.44. Okay, that's worth 1 mark. And for part 2, let's look at the changes overall. Well, 5.4 has become 54. That's multiplied by 10. And 36 has become 360, which is also multiplied by 10. So overall, we should be multiplying the answer by 100, which means that actually we get 19,440 as our answer there. Okay, so that is worth 2 marks in total. I suggest you do your rough work on this bit of a question, and you write your final answers on the answer lines. Okay, so check to see how you did out of 2. That brings us to question 7. Okay, so for question 7, we have 6.7 times 52 is equal to 348.4. They do want one of the division statements, so I am going to match that as part of my prep work. So that's 348.4 divided by 52 is equal to 6.7. Okay, so I've got those two statements ready to help me. For part I, we have 6.7 times 520. Okay, 6.7 has stayed the same. 520 has multiplied by 10. Okay, so my answer has to be multiplied by 10 as well. So 3,484. Okay, for 1 mark. Part 2 says I have 67 times 0.52. Well, this was multiplied by 10 from the original, but 0.52 was divided by 100 from the 52. And so overall, that is the equivalent of dividing by 10. Okay, so my answer needs to be 34.84, which is 1/10 of the original. Okay, and for part 3, we have 3,484 over 5.2. Okay, remember it's better to write it as a fraction to help work this out. Okay, and we know that I'm going to have 67 or 6.7, these digits in our answer. Okay, so let's take a look at how this has been affected. In our original situation, we had 348.4, but what I've done is multiplied it by 10, so my numerator is times 10 greater. Okay, and I had divided by 52, but actually I am dividing that by another 10. Okay, so this is 1/10 smaller. So if I'm multiplying by 10 in the numerator, I've overall multiplied my answer by 10. If I divide by 10 in the denominator, it's 1/10 smaller in the denominator, so again, I've multiplied my overall answer by 10. So overall, I should be multiplying my answer by 100. Okay, and 6.7 times 100 is equal to 670, which is our answer. Okay, so that last bit is also 1 mark. Well done. Make sure you've corrected it and written down that advice if you got that last bit wrong. Okay, that brings us to question 8. Right, so in question 8, we have 56.78, and they would like that to one significant figure. Okay, well, one significant figure literally means one non-zero digit, and we always choose the first one. Okay, so for us, it's the 5, okay, which means we have to be looking at the 6 to inform us, which is the number to the right. Well, the 6 is 5 or higher, and therefore we're going to round that to a 6, so my answer should be 60. You might be wondering, why not just 6? Well, this has a value close to 60, and we have to put the 0 as a placeholder because the value has to be retained, okay? So this is in the tens. I would expect my answer to be in the tens. And that is worth 1 mark. All right, let's look at question 9. Okay, it says write 7,300 correct to one significant figure. So let's write that down. Again, one significant figure. We are focusing on the first non-zero digit, okay, which means we're being informed by the number to the right, which is a 3, that's less than 5. So we're going to keep the 7, and my answer is going to be 7,000. Okay, and that is also worth 1 mark. For part B, we have 5.69, also correct to one significant figure. Okay, so again, we care about that 5. That's the first non-zero digit. We are looking at the 6 to the right. Since it's 5 or higher, that 5 is going to become a 6, and so we're at approximately 6 for our answer. Okay, so your answers would go on the number line. Any work you were doing would go next to the questions. Okay, so moving on to question 10, we can see that Amy and Josh use a calculator to work out this particular calculation. And they've given you both Amy's and Josh's answer, and they're asking you which one is correct. Okay, and they said to use approximations. So what they mean is we're going to round everything to one significant figure and then approximate. So 595 becomes 600, 4.08 becomes 4, and 5.3 becomes 5. We then work that out and we end up with 600 divided by 21. A little bit hard to do that, so we're just going to change that to 20, one significant figure. 600 divided by 20 gives us 30. Now, if we look, AMI is therefore closest. Okay, so AMI is correct. Okay. As 27.1115 is closest to 30. Okay, and that would give you all of your marks. Okay, so obviously you have a method mark for making sure that you're approximating correctly. Okay, another method mark for making sure that those approximations were exact or as exact as possible, as correct as possible. And then we have a statement to get your third mark. So in total, that one is out of 3. Okay, let's look at question 11. We should have write down the square of 8. Okay, so what they mean by that for part A is 8 squared, which is 64. And for part B, they say write down the value of 10 to the power of 3. Well, we know that that is 10 times 10 times 10, which we should know is 1,000. Okay, they're quite straightforward, so you only get 1 mark each. Bringing us to question 12. Okay, I quite like question 12. It's interesting, so let's take a look. It says that a plane travels at a speed of 213 miles per hour. Well, before I do anything, I need to remember that speed is equal to distance divided by time. Okay, that distance is equal to speed times time, and that time is equal to distance divided by speed. I'm not sure which one I'm using, but those are good to have on the side. Okay, it says work out an estimate for the number of seconds the plane takes to travel 1 mile. Okay, so now I know that the one I need to use is time. Okay, so that's what we're going to use. And we know that time is equal to distance divided by speed. So let's take a look at what they told us the speed was. They said the speed was 213. Okay, and they've told us that the distance is 1 mile. All right, so let's take a look. We can say time is equal to 1 over 213. Now, they said to estimate the time in seconds, okay? Well, at the moment, this is in miles per hour, and so our time would be in hours. We want our time to be in seconds, okay? So we have to think about how many seconds in an hour. Well, there's 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour. So in 1 hour, there would be 60 times 60, or 3,600 seconds. Okay, our other issue is 213 is quite tricky to work with, so we're going to round that to one significant figure. So time would be 1 over 200 miles per hour. Okay, so 1 mile over 200 miles per hour, easier to work with. Okay, our last step really is to convert into seconds, which would mean we would multiply this by 3,600. Okay, when we do that, those zeros cancel out, okay, and we are left with the time being 36 divided by 2, or 18 seconds. Okay, right, so that section there gets you a total of 3 marks. All right, so you get 1 mark really for recognizing that it's distance divided by speed, or for recognizing that 1 hour is 3,600 seconds. So that gives you the first mark. Okay, your second mark is your process mark. Okay, are you getting to a stage where you can have the answer? Okay, personally, the estimation, which they've asked you to do, is where you're going to get that second mark most easily. Okay, and for the last one, we need the correct answer, which they've accepted between 16 and 20 seconds. So even if you didn't quite get 18 seconds and you were in that range, you would still get that mark. Right, but for part B, it's asking you, is it an overestimate or an underestimate? Okay, right, so let's have a think. We've rounded the speed down, okay, which means that we've made it seem slower. So our time is going to take longer if we've made it slower. So that would be an overestimate. So for part B, we would say that it was an overestimate because the speed was reduced in our approximation or in our estimate. Okay, so it was an overestimate because the speed was reduced when estimating the time, and obviously that would mean that it was going slower. Right, that brings us to your last homework question, okay, which was question 13. Okay, and they're asking for an estimate. So again, we have to remember one significant figure, please. Okay, so the 31 is going to become 30, 9.87 becomes 10, okay, and 0.509 becomes 0.5. This is going to equal 300 divided by 0.5. Please remember that 0.5 is a half. There are two halves in a whole, okay? So if I was to take this block and divide it by 2, there'd be 2 halves, okay? So dividing by a half is the same as multiplying by 2, so this is equal to 600. And that is your final answer, and that gives you 3 marks, okay? Obviously, because you are estimating at least 2 of these and rounding them, okay? And then for your final answer for your 3rd mark. Okay, so now take the time to add your marks for the second section to the front of your homework, okay? And then make sure you've handed it in to the teacher with your name on the front. Well done today.